Your heart is set on one thing: research, innovation, something new, your project. You have gathered information, spoken to colleagues, made many phone calls. You need a network, relevant partners, European funding. You must minimize the risk. Exactly. Networks, raise money, enter into partnerships, all simultaneously and still promote your project. You lose perspective, lose your strategy. You run out of breath. Euresearch, the Swiss guide to European research and innovation. We inform, advise, and we connect. We have a presence all over Switzerland and are well networked all over Europe. We'll show you the way to partnership and promotion of innovation in Europe. Euresearch, the Swiss guide to European research and innovation.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Juliane Sauer and I have the pleasure to introduce you to today's webinar on career funding, research infrastructures and the social sciences and humanities in Horizon 2020. This is the outline of today's program. I'll briefly explain you the setup of this webinar, and then I will talk a couple of minutes about the future of the Marie Curie Actions in Horizon 2020. My colleague, Judith Spinton, will then talk about the ERC and the research infrastructures in Horizon 2020. My colleague, Regina Schneider, will then talk about social sciences and humanities in the future EC funding program. We will close with a session of approximately 10 to 15 minutes on your questions and our answers. This session will be recorded and later uploaded on our YouTube channel. You will get a follow-up email in the next couple of days with the presentation slides and also the link to the YouTube video, and you're invited to listen to it whenever you feel like it again. The setup of this webinar is the following one. In the big window to your left, you will always see the slides of the presentation. In the upper right-hand corner, you will see a picture of the current speaker, and below it you will find a chat window for your questions. You can ask your questions during the presentation, and we'll take, as I said, a couple of minutes afterwards to answer them. Most of you might already be familiar with the structure of Horizon 2020. There are three pillars: competitive industries, better society, and excellent science. Today, we'll mainly talk about the pillar of excellent science. Additionally, we'll also touch the pillar better society with inclusive society. I'll now lead over to the future of the Marie Curie Actions in Horizon 2020. There we go, there comes the next presentation. So, as I said, the Marie Curie Actions are part of the pillar Excellent in Science. And the main goals of the Marie Curie Actions in the future will be quite similar to those that most of you might already know from FP7. The Marie Curie Actions continue to focus on supporting researchers' careers, and that they will do with a bottom-up approach. This means that any research subject can be funded here. There are no topics given. But very important will the mobility be, transnational mobility and also intersectoral mobility. The Marie Curie Actions foster on key skills and competences that a researcher might need in his or her career. As well as important will be the enhanced business-academia collaboration, and that goes along with staff exchange. Very important, a policy goal of the Marie Curie Actions are the excellent employment and working conditions for researchers. Let's have a look at the Marie Curie Actions, well, now and in the future. On the left-hand side, you can see the 8 funding schemes that exist in FP7 under the Marie Curie Actions. Those 8 funding schemes will be summarized in the future in Horizon 2020 under 4 actions. Now let's have a look what that means. Most of you might know that the Marie Curie Actions have one very important goal, that are fellowships for the researchers. So far, these have been the Intra-European Fellowship, the International Outgoing Fellowship, the International Incoming Fellowship, and the Career Integration Grant. Those 4 types of funding instruments will be summarized under the Action 2. So there will be still many fellowship options for researchers on a postdoctoral level, experienced researchers. We do not yet know in how far the rules will be the same as they have been in FP7. Neither do we know the exact dates of call deadlines nor the budget. However, you can be sure there will be very, very similar types of fellowships for researchers on a postdoctoral level in the future. The Marie Curie Actions do not only have those fellowships, but a couple of host-driven actions, and I'll now explain to you what happens with them. The ITN, the first one that you can see right at the top of the slide, has been the initial training network. This funding scheme will continue, but what will be more emphasized is the focus on innovation. And that means it will also be called in the future innovative training networks. However, it will remain a network of universities, of academia partners, together with partners from the private sector in order to enable PhD students to get a decent start into their career. IAPP and EARSYS have been funding actions for the staff exchange, together with a heavy focus on the collaboration between the sectors, between academia and the private sector. They will be put together now, combined, those two funding, those 2 types of funding instruments will be put together under one action. Most likely this action will be called RISE, R-I-S-E, standing for Research and Innovation Staff Exchange Scheme. We do not yet know the exact conditions and rules of this type of funding. The last action, Action 4, will more or less remain the same as it has been. Co-fund, so far it has been a funding action. It was co-funding of regional, national and international fellowship programs. This will remain the same, but it will be enlarged. It's not only possible under this new co-fund to fund fellowships which target researchers on a postdoctoral level, but also PhD students. So in case you have a running and well-maintained PhD funding fellowship scheme, you could have a look what's out there with the co-fund funding scheme from next year on. This will be opened up also for PhD fellowship schemes. As I said before, unfortunately, we do not yet know the exact timeline, nor the budget, nor the details of the calls. We do expect them to be quite similar regarding the time schedule as they have been in the past years, but details are not yet known. We do expect further information from this fall on. Here you have my contact details as well as my colleagues' contact details. For those of you who are listening who are in another country right now, please find your supporting national contact point in your respective country. We put the link there for you. I will now hand the microphone over to my colleague Judith Spinton, who will explain everything regarding the ERC and the research infrastructures in Horizon 2020.
A very warm welcome from my side as well. I will talk today on behalf of Katja Wirth, who is the Swiss national contact person for the ERC and the Research Infrastructure Program. Let's begin with the European Research Council, the ERC. The ERC is a rather autonomous program. It's governed by a body of 22 distinguished European scientists. However, its implementation is firmly based within the excellent science pillar of Horizon 2020. The essence of the ERC is that it funds groundbreaking frontier research performed by outstanding principal investigators. Hence, the ERC usually does not fund incremental research, but projects of a rather high risk, high gain nature. Also, being a good researcher is not good enough to get an ERC grant. You really need to compete with the best colleagues in your field at your career stage to be chosen for an ERC grant. The program, as the Marie Curie program, follows a bottom-up approach, that is, all fields of science and scholarship are supported. Excellence is the only evaluation criteria for the ERC. Therefore, you do not need to demonstrate the impact that your research will have, for example, on the European economy or society. At the time of application, researchers from any nationality and working at any place in the world can apply. However, of course, for the conduct of the ERC project, you need to be based at a European host institution. There are three main types of ERC grants. Two grant types for rather early stage researchers, namely the starting grant for those between 2 and 7 years after the award of their PhD, and the consolidated grant for those between 7 and 12 years after having obtained their PhD. Note that until the 2012 call, the now called starting and consolidated grants were both running under the name of the starting grant. I should also mention that the eligibility time windows that are noted here can be extended for good reasons, such as parental leave, a long illness, or military service. The third grant type is dedicated for established research leaders. Excuse me. Is dedicated to established research leaders. It's the so-called advanced grant. You also see from the figures noted that there are rather large grants, from up to 1.5 million to up to 2.5 million for starting or to advanced grants, respectively. Usually, these are for projects of up to 5 years. Now, what do we know about the ERC in Horizon 2020? The program will be devoted very much to continuity. That is, we do not expect considerable changes, for example, to the eligibility time window or so on. However, this information is only preliminary at this stage, of course. The EC proposal for Horizon 2020 foresees a considerable, namely nearly 50% budget increase compared to ERC budget in FP7. The ERC is probably the only program where at this stage we already have some indication on the timeline of calls in the first year of Horizon 2020, namely, we expect a publication of the starting grant at the beginning of the year with a deadline in the second quarter, then the consolidated grant being called a bit later in the year, and then towards the end we expect an advanced grant call. We also expect, again, calls for so-called proof of concept grants. These are called usually once a year with 2 deadlines. And these grants are addressed to researchers who already hold an ERC grant to allow them to take their research results the first step towards the market. Some of you might have heard about the so-called Synergy grant, which was called in the last 2 years. It was a pilot action, which is now evaluated in 2014. Might be continued thereafter or not. We don't know, but we don't expect any such call in 2014. Now, if you would like further information on the ERC, I recommend that you consult the very appealing website of the ERC itself. Euresearch, of course, also has a section on the ERC on our website. We also run a so-called excellence blog with information on both the Marie Curie and the ERC programs. For those who are not already registered with Euresearch, I strongly recommend to do so that we can inform you on the latest developments by our established channels. We can help you to assess your eligibility for the ERC as well as to judge whether you would be a competitive candidate. In that regard, it certainly is interesting for you to check which of your peers have obtained an ERC grant in the past. We will have time for a couple of questions at the very end. For all other questions or bilateral advice that you would like on the ERC, Katja and myself are happy to get in touch with us. Now I would like to continue with a few words on research infrastructures in Horizon 2020. This program is also part of the Excellent Science pillar. Research infrastructure is defined by the European Commission as including major scientific equipment, sets of instruments, knowledge-based resources such as databases, archives, etc., as well as e-infrastructures or enabling ICT-based infrastructures. Within the framework program, there is support for both new and existing research infrastructures. Regarding new infrastructures, there is usually no funding for the actual building or setting up of new infrastructures, but funding for the preparatory steps, such as for the consortium of research infrastructures to get together and define, for example, their legal and financial framework to then build the research infrastructures. The program follows a strict top-down approach, that is, the subjects, the research infrastructures to be funded are already predefined in the work program, following a political process in the case of new infrastructures. Also, the applicant consortium is usually largely set when the topic is finally published. In that case, infrastructures is a rather closed club program, as we also call it. Existing research infrastructures were supported by so-called I3 projects in FP7, the Integrated Infrastructure Initiatives, and we expect a similar scheme for Horizon 2020. In these I3 projects, research infrastructures in a certain field across different European countries were collaborating with three main aims, namely to grant transnational access, to do some joint research and coordination. Especially the transnational access part is very interesting for researchers as it allows them to use top world-class infrastructures. In Horizon 2020, we expect also the program, we expect support for new and existing research infrastructure, similar as for Framework Program 7. Additionally, we expect support to foster the potential of research infrastructures, mainly their innovative potential, also in terms of SMEs, for example, providing support material to infrastructures, and also some support to develop the human capital working in research infrastructures. With that, I close my presentation on infrastructures again with our contact details, and I'm looking forward to get your question and hand over the floor to Regina Schneider.
Good afternoon, everyone, also from my part. It is my pleasure to tell you a little bit about what's going to happen to the social sciences and the humanities in Horizon 2020. You are by now familiar with this overview of what Horizon 2020 will look like and its three pillars. Unlike the previous speakers, I'm not going to talk about Excellent Science program on the left-hand side, but on the Better Society pillar on the right-hand side, and more precisely on the societal challenge, which is called in its full title, Europe in a Changing World, Inclusive, Innovative and Reflective Societies. The difference between the pillar on the left and this pillar is that in these challenges are top-down programs, which means that it is the European Commission, together with advisors, who define the topics for which research projects can be submitted. The Sixth challenge, as it's called, is more or less a continuation of the SSH program under FP7. So some of these topics or areas of investigation will look familiar to you. We have the first part, which is called Inclusive Societies, and the number of topics, which I'm not going to enumerate. I just want to add here that these are questions that are mostly directed at researchers in economics or the social sciences in its widest sense. The second part is innovative societies. Again, you see a number of areas which will come under discussion. And again, it's largely the social scientists and economists who are called for to participate in these projects. The third part of the project is rather new to SSH. It's called Reflective Societies, and as such, it is supposed to give more room to researchers in the humanities and aspects that are important to European research projects in general. The humanities up to now have been a bit marginalized, unfortunately, so they want to make up for this. In case you wonder, there was up to now a separate program called Science in Society. It is not quite clear yet where questions dealt with will continue, but most probably it's going to be part of this challenge. Unfortunately, we don't have any information yet about the timeline or the budget of the next calls. We're waiting for further information, which will hopefully be available later this autumn. What we do know, however, is that the focus in the first 2 years, so next year and the year after, in all those three areas will lie on topics that will help the European community to overcome the current financial and economic crisis. So new ideas, strategies, and governance structures are called for. And as I said, further information will come in this autumn, we hope. Now, you may wonder why this program or this challenge has been chosen to be presented together with the horizontal programs like the ERC and Marie Curie Actions. The idea behind it is that in Horizon 2020, SSH is not going, the social sciences and the humanities are not only going to be dealt with in this particular challenge, but they will make an integral part of the whole framework program, and aspects regarding society and societal aspects will be included in each of those pillars, and questions will be included in all three. This means that there will be a full integration of SSH into each of these pillars, that for each of the objectives these programs have, SSH aspects will be taken into consideration, and on the whole, the Commission considers societal aspects to be an essential element of these activities in order to make the framework program a success. So you see SSH is going to be part of the whole framework program, and this again means that true interdisciplinarity is needed, be it on the level of defining topics for each program, but also when it comes to evaluating project or to the actual implementation of the project. So if there are any experts out there who have experience with including or using SSH approaches in projects of other disciplines, they're most welcome to get in touch, be it with me, with my colleagues in the other countries, or with the European Commission. Here are the contact details if you have any questions going beyond the what we told you right now and beyond the time that we have to answer now. You can get in touch with myself if you're based in Switzerland, or with my colleague Denise Erpen. There are also our regional offices that are at your disposal, and if you're listening to us from abroad, we have heard that we're quite popular, not only in Switzerland. So you are most welcome to get in touch with the national contact persons in the other countries, which you can find at this link that we also showed you before. And now I think it's time for questions and their answers.
Thank you very much to my co-speakers. We did receive a question regarding the Marie Curie Actions. The question was, will the Marie Curie Actions include the joint doctoral programs in the ITN? Up to now, the ITN concluded 2 sub-schemes. That was the IDP, the Innovative Doctoral Program, and the EID, the European Industrial Doctorate. As far as we know now, it's foreseen in Horizon 2020 that the European Industrial Doctorate will be continued under ITN, and the IDP will be comprised under the co-fund scheme. This co-fund is now open for PhD fellowship funding schemes. It is expected that this will take over then what has been before the IDP. Again, all these details have to be confirmed, we hope so, later during this year. I will now pass over the microphone to Judith Spinton, who will answer the ERC-related questions.
Yes, I have 2 questions here at the moment regarding the ERC. The first one that came in was on the timeline for the consolidated grant. Specifically, the person asked why the deadline was in the same quarter of the year as the publication, whether that was a mistake. Indeed, the information we have is that both the call of the consolidated grant and its deadline will be in the second quarter of 2014. I don't think this was a typo. When you consider that a quarter of a year has 3 months, I so far had assumed that the publication would be at the very start of the quarter, for example, in April, and the deadline 3 months later within that same quarter. But anyway, these are really just indications. They plan to publish the starting grant early in the year, then the consolidated grant, but whether that will be March, April, or May, I don't think we can say at the moment. But we will inform you as soon as we have more news on exact timelines. Then another question I received on the ERC was whether there were any news regarding the Synergy grant of the ERC. I think I've briefly mentioned that this was a funding scheme that was introduced in the last 2 work programs of the ERC, and it was grants not for single individual PIs with their team, but the idea was that between 2 and 4 individual PIs came together and tackled a research subject in an interdisciplinary manner. Yet this should not be confused with a consortial approach. As I said, there were 2 calls in the past on Synergy grants. This was a pilot, it was declared as a pilot, and the Scientific Council has announced that they will use the year 2014 to evaluate these 2 pilot calls, and then based on this evaluation decide whether they will continue with the scheme in 2015 or not. I hope I've satisfactorily answered this question.
If there are not any further questions, or we did not treat your question right now, we invite you to send us your questions or maybe also follow-up questions later on via email. You have all the contact detail in the presentation, and as I said, in the next couple of days you will get the follow-up email with all the presentations and also the link to our YouTube video. We would now like to thank you very much for attending our webinar. The next webinar in our series on Horizon 2020 will be held on July 1st. This one will deal with clean tech thematics. Thank you very much, and we'll hope to be in touch again with you soon.